Smoke still curled over Riverton Civic Hall when firefighter Isaiah Reed helped Mayor Caroline Hayes toward the ambulance lights. Then the silver necklace slipped from her collar, and Isaiah froze so hard his captain called his name twice. He knew that teardrop pendant his mother wore it the night she exposed East Dock's unsafe housing and vanished from every official record. Reporters lifted their cameras as Isaiah stepped closer. "Madam Mayor," he said, voice shaking, "why are you wearing my mother's necklace?" By dawn, every newsroom in Riverton was calling. Some truths do not burn in the fire, they wait in the smoke. 17 minutes before sunrise, Isaiah Reed sat on the rear step of Engine 7 outside Riverton Civic Hall, his turnout coat open, gray ash dusting his gloves, red and blue lights washing over the wet pavement. The gala guests had been moved across the street, wrapped in silver emergency blankets, whispering about ruined gowns and campaign donors. Isaiah barely heard them. His eyes stayed locked on Mayor Caroline Hayes, standing near the ambulance in a pale evening dress, one hand pressed to her throat. A silver teardrop necklace had slipped into view. Isaiah knew that necklace. His mother had worn it in the last photograph ever taken of her. Isaiah stood before he realized his boots were moving. Captain Maria Torres called after him, but he crossed the pavement toward the mayor like the whole city had gone silent around him. Caroline Hayes looked shaken, but unharmed, her campaign staff trying to guide her toward a black SUV. Grant Holloway, her chief of staff, stepped between them with a practiced smile. "Firefighter, thank you for your service. The mayor needs space." Isaiah did not look at him. His eyes stayed on the necklace, the small silver drop catching every flash from the cameras. "Madam Mayor," he said, his voice low but clear, "why are you wearing my mother's necklace?" The last reporter still on scene turned as one. Caroline touched the pendant and went pale. Grant moved quickly, turning his body toward the cameras as if a suit could block the truth. "He is exhausted," Grant said. "All first responders have been through a difficult night." Isaiah heard the old language immediately. Make him emotional, make him unstable, make him small. Caroline still had her fingers on the pendant, her eyes searching his face. "This was my father's," she said, but the certainty was missing. Isaiah swallowed hard. "My mother was Lena Reed. She wore that necklace every day in East Dock." The name hit the pavement like a dropped glass. One reporter whispered it twice. Grant's smile tightened. Caroline looked at him. "Why do I know that name?" For 1 second, no one answered her. The only sound was water dripping from the fire hoses and the distant crackle of radios. Isaiah saw Grant glance toward the black SUV, not at the mayor, not at the cameras, but toward escape. That tiny look told him more than any confession. "Because my mother filed complaints about East Dock apartments," Isaiah said. "Broken alarms, locked exits, families ignored. She kept copies because the city kept losing them." Caroline's breath caught. Behind her polished campaign smile, something human began to break through. Grant lowered his voice. "Madam Mayor, we need to leave." But Caroline did not move. She unclasped the necklace with shaking hands and turned it over. Inside the silver drop, 3 tiny words were engraved. The engraving was so small Caroline had to tilt it toward the flashing emergency lights. For Isaiah, when truth gets heavy. Her face changed before she spoke, all the campaign polish draining away. Isaiah felt the ground tilt under him. He remembered his mother at the kitchen table, rubbing that pendant between her fingers after long days helping families at East Dock. "She said water could put out a spark if it arrived in time," he whispered. Caroline looked at Grant. "You told me this was my father's." Grant's jaw tightened. "Your father kept many things." A reporter stepped closer. "Mayor Hayes, did your office know about Lena Reed?" Caroline closed her hand around the necklace, then looked at Isaiah. "I need to see everything your mother left behind." By 5:42 in the morning, Isaiah's phone would not stop ringing. News alerts called him heroic, unstable, political, brave, and bitter, all before sunrise. He ignored them and drove Caroline to the small East Dock house his mother had refused to leave. The mayor arrived without cameras, without Grant, without her campaign smile. Inside, Isaiah opened a tin box beneath the kitchen sink. There was the last photograph of Lena Reed, standing outside East Dock apartments with the same silver necklace at her throat, holding complaint forms about broken alarms and locked exits. Caroline touched the photo like it might burn her. Behind Lena stood a younger Victor Slade, smiling beside a city permit sign. Isaiah said, "That man funds your campaign." Caroline stared at the photograph until the morning light through the kitchen blinds cut across Victor Slade's younger face. "He gave my father that necklace," she whispered. Isaiah opened another envelope and spread the papers across the table. Maintenance requests. Fire safety complaints. Copies of letters Lena had mailed to City Hall. Every page had a stamped date, and every page ended the same way, resolved. But nothing in East Dock had been fixed. Caroline's hand tightened around the pendant. "My office buried this." Isaiah looked at the chipped walls of the house his mother had fought to keep. "Your city did," he said. "And my mother paid for telling people before the cameras cared." Caroline reached for her phone, but it rang first. Grant's name filled the screen. Caroline let the phone ring twice before answering on speaker. Grant's voice came through sharp and breathless. "Where are you?" "Do not speak to Isaiah Reed again. We are releasing a statement that he misidentified the necklace under stress." Caroline looked at Isaiah, then at Lena's papers covering the table. "How did you know the necklace mattered before I did?" Silence. Half a second, maybe less, but it changed the room. Grant cleared his throat. "Because reporters are twisting this." Caroline's voice cooled. "No, Grant. You were ready before they called." Isaiah watched her finally hear what his mother had heard years ago, the sound of powerful people closing doors. Caroline ended the call and said, "Take me to East Dock." East Dock apartments looked smaller in daylight and worse up close. Rust stained the stair rails. Old smoke alarms hung open in the hallway, their wires exposed like empty veins. Caroline walked behind Isaiah without saying a word, her heels clicking softly over cracked tile while tenants watched from half-open doors. Isaiah stopped beside apartment 312, where his mother had once helped a family after a hallway filled with smoke. "She came here after 12-hour shifts," he said. "Not for money, not for attention, because people were scared." Caroline touched the wall where peeling paint curled from damp plaster. For the first time, the mayor saw the city from below the podium. "Open the archive," she said. Today, the city archive sat beneath City Hall, 2 floors below marble hallways and campaign portraits. Caroline used her access card while Isaiah stood beside her, still smelling faintly of smoke from the night before. A clerk brought out 3 gray boxes marked East Dock Maintenance Review, and Caroline opened the first with careful hands. Inside were Lena Reed's complaints, each stamped received, each stamped resolved, and each attached to photographs that proved nothing had been repaired. Then Isaiah found the signature line. Grant Holloway. Back then, he had been deputy housing liaison. Caroline turned the page and saw Victor Slade's company awarded a redevelopment contract 6 weeks later. She closed her eyes, then opened them colder. "Call a press conference," she said, "and suspend Grant immediately." By the next morning, the steps of City Hall were packed before Caroline even reached the podium. Reporters shouted over one another, asking about the necklace, Grant, Victor Slade, and East Dock. Isaiah stood a few feet behind her in his dress uniform, uncomfortable under the cameras, but unwilling to let his mother's name stand alone again. Caroline placed the silver pendant on the podium first. The crowd quieted. "This does not belong to me," she said. "It belonged to Lena Reed, a woman this city failed, dismissed, and tried to forget." Isaiah felt his throat tighten. Caroline lifted the archive file beside it. Her warnings were received. Her warnings were marked resolved. And her warnings were ignored. Caroline turned another page, and the cameras leaned closer. "Grant Holloway has been suspended pending a full investigation. All redevelopment contracts connected to Victor Slade will be frozen today." A wave of voices broke across the steps, but she raised one hand and kept going. "This is not about saving my campaign. This is about returning a name to the woman who earned it." She looked back at Isaiah. For the first time since the fire, he did not feel like the city was asking him to prove his pain. Caroline picked up the necklace and placed it in his palm. "Your mother tried to protect Riverton before any of us listened," she said. "Now we finally will." 6 months later, East Dock smelled like fresh paint, new wiring, and rain on clean brick. Isaiah stood outside apartment 312 as workers installed the final fire alarm, its green light blinking steady in the hallway where his mother had once begged the city to listen. Caroline arrived without cameras, wearing a simple navy coat and no necklace. The pendant now rested inside a glass case at Firehouse 7, Beside Lena Reed's photograph and the first page of her warning file. Above it, a small brass plate read, "The Lena Reed Initiative." Isaiah touched the glass, then smiled for the first time in days. A drop of water can put out a spark, but a drop of truth can change an entire city.